They say that the ears that refuse to hear the whistle of the wind will eventually feel the sting of the hurricane. My name is Amadi, and I am a man who lived half my life as a ghost because I thought my youth made me wiser than the gray hairs of my fathers. In the village of Omi-Ofe, there is a river called the Omi-Ofe. It is not a river that flows with water alone. It flows with the memories of those who came before us. The water is a deep, unnatural turquoise. So clear you can see the pebbles at the bottom, yet so cold it feels like the touch of a spirit. For 7 generations, the decree was simple. Fetch from the stream of the valley, drink from the wells of the hills, but never on the pain of a shortened life. Dip your pot into the Omi-Ofe after the sun has hidden its face behind the iroko trees. I was 22, with muscles like coiled pythons and a heart full of the arrogance that comes with being the strongest wrestler in the 7 lands. I laughed at the elders. I told my friends that the Forbidden River was just a story told to keep children from drowning. One evening, a heat wave hit Omi-Ofe that made the very soil crack like broken pottery. The village wells ran dry. The valley stream was nothing but mud. My mother, a woman whose skin was like wrinkled silk and whose faith in the Almighty was her only shield, lay on her mat, her throat parched, gasping for a single drop of life. "Amadi," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves scraping on stone. "Do not go. The thirst is a test. God will send the rain." But I looked at her dying eyes and felt a rage against the heavens. Why should she suffer for a story? I grabbed the largest clay pot we owned. I did not head for the valley. I headed for the deep woods, where the air grows thick and the crickets go silent. I reached the banks of the Omi-Ofe just as the sun dipped its final toe into the horizon. The water didn't ripple. It breathed. As I knelt down to dip my pot, a voice, cold as the depths themselves, whispered my name from the reeds. Not my name as the world knew it, but the secret name my mother spoke only in prayer. I froze. The pot was halfway full. The water in the pot suddenly turned from clear turquoise to a deep, pulsing crimson red, and the reflection I saw in the surface was not my own face, but the face of a man who died 50 years before I was born. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The face in the water moved its lips. It didn't speak with sound, but with a vibration that shook my very marrow. "You have brought a vessel to the table of the spirits, Amadi, but the Omi-Ofe does not give for free. What are you prepared to leave behind?" I scrambled back, but my hands were stuck to the clay pot. It was as if the earth itself had grown fingers to hold me there. I cried out to the God of my mother, but my voice felt small against the towering ancient trees. Shadows began to detach themselves from the trunks, moving toward me, not like animals, but like smoke. "I only want water for my mother," I bellowed. "She's dying." The shadows stopped. The air grew impossibly cold, and a figure emerged from the mist. It was a woman, tall and draped in white cloth that never touched the muddy ground. Her eyes were not eyes. They were 2 stars trapped in a face of polished ebony. "A mother's life for a son's pride," she said softly. "You came here to prove the elders wrong, not just to save her, but because you mentioned the name that holds the universe together, I will give you a choice. Take the water. It will heal her, but from this night on, you will never taste water again. Every liquid that touches your tongue will be as dry as the sand of the Sahara." I looked at the pot. The red was fading back to blue. I thought of my mother's gasping breath. I thought of my own strength. I could endure a little thirst, I thought. I took the deal. I ran back to the village, the pot light as a feather in my arms. I reached our hut and pressed the cup to my mother's lips. As she drank, color returned to her cheeks. She sat up, her eyes bright and clear. "Amadi," she cried, embracing me. "The Lord has provided." I smiled, though my throat felt a bit tight. I reached for the water bucket to take a celebratory drink myself. I poured a cup and brought it to my lips. As the water touched my tongue, it didn't flow. It turned into hot, dry dust in my mouth, choking me as I realized the spirit's curse was not a metaphor. It was a death sentence. The curse of the Omi-Ofe did not kill me quickly. That would have been a mercy, and the spirits of the forbidden water are not known for their mercy, only for their brutal honesty. For 3 years, I lived as a walking ghost. Imagine, if you can, standing in the middle of a torrential downpour, opening your mouth to the heavens and feeling nothing but the sting of dry pebbles against your throat. While the rest of the village celebrated the end of the great drought, I sat in the corner of my mother's hut, clutching my throat, my tongue feeling like a piece of dried leather left too long in the sun. I tried everything. I went to the palm wine tappers, thinking the fermented blood of the trees might bypass the curse. I watched as the frothy, white liquid poured from the gourd. It smelled of sweetness and earth. But the moment it crossed the threshold of my lips, it transformed. The liquid vanished. In its place, my mouth was filled with hot, bitter ash. I coughed, a cloud of grey dust erupting from my lungs as the tappers backed away in horror, crossing their chests and whispering that I had invited a devouring spirit into my body. The weight of the secret. My mother, healed by the very water that had cursed me, watched me wither. She would bring me bowls of pepper soup, rich with the oils of the land. I would try to swallow the broth, but the LifeTaughtMe lesson began here. You cannot sustain the body when the soul has made a crooked bargain. The soup became sand. The moisture in the meat became sawdust. I became a skeleton draped in mahogany skin. My strength, once the pride of the wrestling arena, evaporated like mist. My ribs began to count themselves against my skin, a ladder of bone that led to a hollow chest. "Amadi," my mother would weep, her hand trembling on my brow. "What have you done? There is a smell of the grave upon you." I could not tell her. To tell her was to admit that her life was bought with my damnation. And so I learned the first spiritual lesson of the wilderness. Silence in sin is a slow-growing cancer. By hiding my disobedience, I was feeding the curse. The flight into the barren lands. By the 2nd year, the village priest began to eye me with suspicion. They said I was an Ogbanje, a spirit child who had overstayed his welcome. To save my mother from the shame, I gathered my tattered loincloth and a staff of Iroko wood and walked into the midday sun. I headed for the lands where no one knew my name, the rocky outskirts of the Northern Territories. I spent months wandering the jagged cliffs. I watched the goats drink from the mountain springs and wept with a jealousy that burned hotter than the sun. I learned to live on the moisture of prayer alone. I found that while my body screamed for water, my spirit began to hear things the well-fed man is too deaf to perceive. I heard the mountains groaning under the weight of the world. I heard the grass whispering the names of God in a language of rustles. In my thirst, I realized that I had spent my youth drinking from the wells of my own ego, never realizing that the soul requires a different kind of saturation. One night, under a moon as sharp as a warrior's blade, I collapsed near a dried-up riverbed. My skin was peeling, my eyes sunken into my skull. I cried out, not to the river spirit, but to the God my mother spoke of, the one who walked through the fire with the 3 Hebrew boys. "If I am to die," I rasped, my voice sounding like 2 stones grinding together, "let me die with the truth on my lips. I stole the water. I broke the law. I thought I was a god, but I am only dust." As I confessed, the ground beneath me began to vibrate. Not the cold, terrifying shake of the Omi-Ofe, but a warm, rhythmic thumping like the heartbeat of a great father. The lesson of the dew. A small bird, no bigger than a thumb, landed on my parched chest. It carried a single leaf in its beak, a leaf from the tree of life that grows only in the dreams of the righteous. It dropped a single drop of morning dew onto my lip. For the first time in 3 years, I felt moisture. It didn't turn to dust. It didn't turn to ash. It was a single drop of grace, and it felt like an ocean. But as I reached out to grab the bird, it flew away toward the direction of the forbidden river. I realized then that my healing was not in the desert. It was back where my sin began. I had to face the water that had broken me. I had to go back to the Omi-Ofe, not as a thief, but as a sacrifice. I stood up, my bones creaking like the floorboards of an old house. I began the long walk back to Umu-Oda. Every step was a battle against the spirit of despair who walked beside me, whispering that I would only find a grave at the journey's end. As I reached the outskirts of my village, I saw that the green forests I once knew were gone. The entire region was engulfed in a strange blue fire, a fire that didn't burn the trees, but froze them in a shroud of turquoise ice. The river had left.